Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I'm going to be talking about books I think explain who I am. Before I get into the concept of this video, I just want to say, so that I don't get 100 comments about it, my shirt says marry your gays. That's what it says. It says marry your gays instead of bury them! I love this shirt. Okay, so today's video I'm going to be talking about a few books that I think explain who I am as a person. So as YouTubers, we put a lot of ourselves out on the internet. We explain who we are, we're open about our lives to a certain extent. But I think that sometimes we represent shades of ourselves, not our entire selves. And I want to talk about 6 books today that I think explain my personality, explain who I am. They are books with main characters who have my problems, who have my flaws, who have my hopes and my dreams and my sexuality. So if you were curious about me, if you want to understand me better as a person, here are 6 books that explain Cece. The first book that I want to talk about is Jane Unlimited by Kristin Cashore. If you've been watching this channel for any length of time, I'm sure that you know about this book. I've been talking about it non-stop, and I don't really think I'm going to explain the plots of any of these books so much as why I think they explain a little bit about me. Jane Unlimited is about a queer, nerdy main character who is trying to figure out what to do with her life post-college. That's me. That's it. I could almost end this video here. Jane and I are not identical. We're both creative, but Jane is much more creative in an artistic way, and my creativity goes in other places. Jane dropped out of college due to a loss, and I graduated, but I still felt this deep connection to her in terms of not really knowing what to do with your life post-college, in terms of having this urge to create but not really knowing what to do with it or how to apply that creativity. I identified with her crushing on this girl who loves Doctor Who and Lord of the Rings. Jane is a little piece of my heart. So if you read this book, I think you'll be a little closer to understanding me. With all that being said, Jane is bisexual, and also there are elements of her that I don't necessarily identify with. So another book that I want to talk about is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. Now, this book is not all mine to claim. It is a book about a Puerto Rican lesbian girl who is struggling to find her place within white feminism, and those are parts of her identities that I couldn't claim. But this is the book that I have felt the most connected to in terms of seeing my personal sexuality represented. Juliet is a lesbian, and she is trying desperately to figure out what that means in relation to her family. I've never related more to a queer girl character and how she is attracted to women. There is a short love story in the middle that I couldn't get over because I felt like I was finally seeing what my identity means to me. Beyond that, this is a book about feminism, and yes, it's about calling out white feminism, but it's a book that I read while I was getting my minor in women's and gender studies, which is a decision I made when I was 19, which is how old Juliet is. As I was coming to terms with my sexuality, that's when I branched out into women's studies classes, learning more about feminism, and then getting really involved in intersectional feminism classes. But there are parts of Juliet and her character and her story that rang so true to me and represented myself and my feelings in a way that I had never read in a book before. The next book I want to talk about is Autoboyography by Christina Lauren, and this is a book that represents my connection between my sexuality and a religion that I grew up being a part of. I grew up in Utah, and I grew up with a family that was decidedly Mormon, or LDS, and part of me accepting who I was and my sexuality was dealing with the fact that this is a religion that I grew up a part of. This book gets it. It understands what it means to grow up in Utah. It understands how Mormon this area is, how it feels to have everyone around you be Mormon and to have the same sort of values. It sees the nuance in religion, particularly this religion, and how that nuance applies to sexuality, especially in the face of a church that does not deem alternative sexualities acceptable. This is a love story, but it is also a heartbreaking story of a queer Mormon teen coming to terms with being gay. I cried through it, and I laughed, and I underlined aggressively. This book is me. This book is what it meant for me to grow up, and it's who I was as a kid, who I was in high school. So if you want to understand more of where I came from and how I grew up, this is the book I have to recommend to you, and it will always have an incredibly special place in my heart because of it. Next up, I want to talk about More Than This by Patrick Ness, which this is a weird sci-fi book, but it does really understand my relationship with my family, at least part of that relationship. I'm not really going to get into why that is. If you read this book, maybe you know, but there was a bit near the beginning of this book where Seth, the main character, explains how he fits into his family and his place within that family, and I remember having to set the book down because I had burst into sobs. There is obviously a lot of nuance in terms of everyone's relationship to their family, but how Seth feels about where he stands with his parents, with his sibling, it was really hard to read because it was a story and a place that I strongly identified with. So this is a weird sci-fi book with a strange beginning and a somewhat odd ending. It's deeply weird, but it's also a part of me. Second to last, I want to talk about Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills, which more fully kind of explains my relationship with my sister. I haven't found a YA contemporary yet with characters who are two sisters who really represent how me and my sister react. I think Upside of Unrequited got close, but I think Foolish Hearts gets a little bit closer in terms of explaining general sibling relationships. Claudia has two siblings, a slightly older brother and a much older sister, and her relationship with both of them, if you kind of combine it, is how I feel a lot about my relationship with my sister. I'm 5.5 years older than my sister, but we are also the only two siblings that we have, so even though we grew up kind of far apart, we're also very close. We've grown up together. She's my friend, the person that I want to spend time with. While this doesn't get every nuance of my relationship with my sister, and some stuff happens towards the ending that I really don't think would happen with my sister and I, it understands sibling relationships in general, and I think if you have a sibling, you'll probably relate to a lot of this. So yes, More Than This represents a shade of my relationship with my family, but so does Foolish Hearts. And that's the thing. Your relationship with your family is always going to be complex. I would probably need a lot more books than these two to explain it, but hey, now you have two pieces of my puzzle. And the final book I want to talk about that explains who I am is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I put off reading this book for a very long time, but this book is so perfectly me, my freshman and sophomore years of college. I just realized this is the third book I have talked about with a college-age protagonist. Kat's anxieties and fears and her tendency to tie everything back to a fictional universe, these were all things that I really did a lot of my freshman year of school. I spent a good deal of time writing fan fiction, being afraid to go to events and being afraid to reach out. It was a terrifying new world where I suddenly lived on the opposite end of the country from my family, and I hadn't been apart from my family for longer than 2 weeks in my entire life. Maybe I don't write fan fiction quite as much as I used to, and by the time I graduated college, I was a lot more willing to put myself out there and try new things even if they terrified me. But Fangirl is who I was for a long time, and I think that there's still a little bit of Kath within me at any given point in my life. Well, there you go. Those are 6 books that I think explain Cece as a person. If you've wanted to know more about me, some more complex understanding beyond a 10 to 15 minute video, maybe these books give you a little bit of a look. What about you guys? Do you think you can identify a few books that explain a bit who you are as a person? This was a really hard video to plan because I think we see ourselves in characters, but it's hard to choose a select few that explain who we are. I've always connected to fictional characters. It's always been a way of explaining myself to the people around me. I submerge myself in fiction as a way to understand myself better and as a way to explain myself better. I hope that all makes sense to you, and I hope that this was a video you enjoyed. Let me know if it was something you liked down in the comments below, as well as telling me some books that you see yourself in. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!